So today I'm going to be sharing with you how you can make authentic restaurant tasting hummus right in your home and some authentic falafel to go with it. Two very traditional Middle Eastern dishes. And I've been making hummus for a long time. And many of you know I'm from the Detroit area, and Detroit has a huge Middle Eastern population. And consequently, we have a lot of authentic Middle Eastern
Did you give me my
eateries.
cheese whiz, boy?
I got your cheese whiz right here, Duncan. Thank you for the cheer and good morning and welcome, Duncan. A lot of authentic Middle Eastern restaurants in the Detroit area. Anyway, so that's my gold standard is the restaurants in the Detroit area, and my favorite is a chain called La Marsa, and they're all over the Detroit area, even a bit beyond. There's a whole bunch of locations, and to me, their hummus is the best that I've ever had. And about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, they actually posted their recipe. So that's the recipe I'm going to be using today. And the falafel recipe, I just found it online. And they're both the recipes we're using today is linked at the top of chat. So I've been making hummus for a very long time. And like I said, my gold standard was places like La Marsa in the Detroit area. And whenever I tried to make hummus at home, it just never came out anything like the stuff I had, at the restaurants that I was used to eating at in the Detroit area. And that was very frustrating for me. And I tried so many different recipes and experimented with a lot of different things that different hummus makers will try to tell you to do. I've seen just the wackiest things from people saying put sour cream in there to put mayonnaise in there or different spices and peel your chickpeas to make it smoother and things like this and but the good news is none of that is necessary. So something like a step like peeling your chickpeas to get creamy hummus. Peeling chickpeas takes a long time. Now you can, after a while, a lot of those skins come off and you can just skim it off the water. But, if you were trying to get every last one, that would take a ridiculous amount of time, but it's totally not necessary. And I remember talking about this on the stream a while back, and somebody had suggested that maybe, that whole thing came from, back in the olden days when they would have to make hummus with a mortar and pestle instead of, having a food processor that just blends it all up really well. So I'm going to show you not only how to make great tasting hummus, but a hummus that is very, very creamy. And it's not going to take a lot of extra work. And so what I learned, the difference between when I was making hummus when I was a younger man versus now, and the big difference is actually only subtle differences in the ingredients that you use. But when I was new to making hummus, I didn't know that these subtle things were important. So for example, when you're making your hummus, you never, ever, 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 ever want to use this. This is a can of chickpeas. And chickpeas, as you may know, is the base ingredient in hummus. Okay? I didn't understand when I was younger the huge difference between that and this, which is dried chickpeas that you rehydrate just by covering with water, putting a little bit of baking soda in the water, a couple of teaspoons. This is 2 cups dry measure of chickpeas soaked overnight. Actually, they've been soaking for a couple of days. So it's 2 cups of dried chickpeas covered with water, 2 teaspoons of baking soda. You want to mix it in there and just put it in your refrigerator and let it soak overnight or for a day or two. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with the difference between, dried chickpeas that you rehydrate versus canned chickpeas, think about the difference between fresh or frozen green beans versus canned green beans, right? I love green beans, but you know what I don't love? Canned green beans, because they're just mush. If you like canned green beans, no disrespect, but I like them fresh or frozen. Huge difference, right? Canned corn versus fresh corn. or even frozen corn. Big difference there. Okay. Similarly, canned chickpeas versus chickpeas that started dry and you rehydrated them, big difference. So that's super, super important. And like I said, when I was new to making hummus, that didn't even occur to me. Okay. Now, dried chickpeas are going to be available at pretty much any grocery store. They just come in a bag with in the dried bean section. So, and they're not very expensive at all. In fact, they're probably cheaper than canned chickpeas. Well, Ganiaski says peeling the chickpeas, people are crazy. Well, there's a lot of people out there that swear that that's what you need to do to get smooth hummus, but I assure you, it is absolutely not necessary. Now, what I suspect is that some of those people who swear it's necessary aren't using very good food processors. But the reality is that you don't need to use a really good food processor. Today, I'm going to be using a Cuisinart. This is like a mid-range Cuisinart, and I should thank all of you who support my channel for this, because I used to use just a cheapy $20 Hamilton Beach that my mom got at a garage sale 10 years ago, and that thing worked just fine. But then it almost caught on fire one time that I was making hummus, because it was just old. The gears wear out, right? I'm not throwing my old Hamilton Beach under the bus or anything. I'm just saying, they wear out after a while. I had used it for a long time. But, by the time I needed a new food processor, the channel had grown and I could afford to get something a little bit nicer than the cheapie. So I thank you. And it has special meaning to me because so I'm happily divorced. I've been happily divorced since 2003. And one of the things I lost in the divorce was a Cuisinart food processor that we had gotten as a wedding gift. And I loved that thing. Oh man, did I love that thing. But I lost it in a divorce. So a couple years ago when I picked up the Cuisinart food processor, it meant a lot to me to be able to have this. Like I said at the start, and as so many of you know, I love to cook, and I love having a nice food processor. But I want you to know that you don't have to go out and spend $200 on a food processor to make good hummus. You just get a basic one. But I think some people, try to make their hummus in a blender or on one of those mini food processors or something like a hand blender or maybe like a magic bullet or something like that. You don't want to use those things for making your hummus. Another trick to making really creamy hummus is, and this is the most subjective part of it, is how much water or ice you put in there. And so a lot of people, a mistake that new hummus makers make is that they try to make their hummus to consistency when they make it. But hummus thickens up so much. You actually want to make it thin to begin with. And the more water you're putting in there and the thinner that it is when you're blending it, that's going to help make it creamier. Okay, so we're going to be moving back and forth between the two recipes. Bertle, good morning and welcome. We're going to be moving back and forth between the two recipes because there's times where the chickpeas you're going to have to cook, and the falafel actually has to sit for an hour after we first make it. It needs to sit for an hour. So actually, I think I'm going to get the falafel going first. If you have any questions about any steps along the way, please ask. And I also have to thank you guys who support the channel because all the equipment I'm using right now is mobile equipment. I'm actually streaming using the phone camera. I got my laptop here. Oh man, that video looks choppy. And it's physically plugged into the computer too. Okay, it looks like it's smoothing out now. Anyways, you're the reason that I can even for those of you who support the show, you're the reason I can even do this. You're the reason because you support the show. I was afford to be able to make some, investments in additional equipment like this so that I can do the mobile streams and go out in the woods with you guys once in a while, or I can do the bowling streams, or once in a while do a cooking stream. And I'm going to give you another bit of meta streaming advice here, because I know that some of you are streamers, and it's important to eat, it's important to eat good food while we're streaming. meaning like, if you're streaming for hours and you like to take a break, I like to take a break every hour on the hour. That's really good. Get up, move around. You don't want to sit still for long periods of time. That's why I force myself to take a break every hour just to get up and get the blood flowing. We're all gamers, and probably most of us are guilty for, sitting around on our computer chair playing our game for hours on end, right? But it's good to get up and move around. Paydor, good morning and welcome. And when you're a streamer and you get up on your break, you usually don't want to be away from your stream for very long. So it's really easy to sort of fall into a rut of reaching for, some cookies or some chips or something like that. And, you do that too much, you're going to start looking like me, okay? Does this shirt make me look fat? What about now? Okay, so it's important to, have some good food when you're a streamer that is easily available, and doesn't take long to grab or prepare. So this is one of the foods that I like to eat during my break is, I keep a little, Pyrex of the different toppings and then another Pyrex with, my hummus and another one with my falafel. And during my breaks, I can just quickly throw that stuff in a tortilla, wrap it up, eat it, get back to our regular stream. Durja, good morning and welcome. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to set my chickpeas aside here. And both of the recipes that we're using today, the hummus and the falafel, are pinned to the top of chat. As I said before, these aren't my recipes, so I'm taking no credit for them. But I don't know about you. We were talking about learning modes, the other day and how different people learn differently. And I'm the kind of person that, I like to see something done. I'm not very good at reading something and it making sense to me. I mean, it's not that I can't read and make sense of something, but, it clicks better when I see somebody do it. And that's part of what this stream is about. I want to show you guys that you can too. Remember, that's one of the most important, morals of the story to all of my DDO content that I produce is you can too. I don't make content to show you what I can do. I make content to show you what you can do. And this cooking show is no different. All right, so let's see, where are we going to start with? I'm going to put my herbs in there first. So here I've got one bunch of parsley. The exact measure is in the recipe pinned to the top, but I just use one bunch, close enough. Okay, and then I'm going to cut off, a big hunk of it because that's mostly stems, right? If you want to, you could actually just throw the stems right in there.
Are you making my chicken dinner, boy?
I've told you, Duncan, you come to Michigan, I'll buy you a chicken dinner. All right, so yeah, the food processor just blend those. There's a lot of flavor in the stems too, so whether or not you want to use the stems, that's up to you. I'm gonna go throw these out. And I'm just gonna, very, very coarsely give them a couple chops so it's not taking up so much space in the food processor, okay? And then I've got my one bunch of cilantro. Now, cilantro is a very controversial herb. I love it. I can eat this stuff, raw by the handful. To me, it is just so delicious and fresh tasting. I can't get enough of it. But a lot of people hate cilantro, and they say it tastes like soap to them, and that's supposedly genetic. In any event, if you don't like cilantro, just leave it out. You could put some extra parsley or dill in there, or just leave it out altogether. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to cut off the stems, big wad of stems, and I'm going to throw that out. And just give it a couple of coarse chops. Sift through it to see if you got any bad leaves or something, any leaves that are starting to turn brown or yellow or something. You can pull those out. And then I'm just going to grab it all and stick it in the food processor. Okay. Now I've got my fresh dill. And I'm kind of do the same thing here. This stuff is, there's not a lot here. I'm going to be a little bit more careful about just cutting off the stems a little bit. You know, you don't have to be perfect. Just get some of those bigger pieces out. You know, if you got stem pieces like this, you know, you can cut those off. You don't want any hard bits in your finished product. Okay, that's actually pretty good. Good enough. Good enough for government work. That's what the kids say. And I'm just going to toss that in there. Okay? So now I've got my cilantro and my parsley and my dill in my food processor. Chief, good morning and welcome. We're making authentic hummus and falafel. Recipes are pinned to the top. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to do, I got a small onion here. And I'm going to put that whole small onion into the food processor. Getting rid of course, the outside layer. And, you know, make sure you check whatever ends up being your outer layer. Make sure you check that it's not too ripe, because, you know, onion layers can get really hard, and you don't want those hard layers, those tough layers in your recipe. So I'm just putting in big hunks in there because the food processor is going to chew it right up. So you don't have to worry about chopping it ahead of time. Just you might not want to put like a frickin' whole onion in there, you know what I'm saying? But that's just quartered, no big whoop. Okay, so next I'm going to use some garlic. And my cutting board's all wet from the herbs. That's better. I'm just going to take the whole cluster and just kind of push down on it so that smashes it into its individual cloves. Some of you may have never, you know, worked with fresh garlic before. So I just want to show these things to you. Most of you probably have. Some of you may not even cook at all, and that's okay. I like to buy the organic garlic, but the organic garlic is always so much smaller, and it's just more of a pain working with those smaller cloves of garlic, right? You got to peel so many more of them to get the amount that you're looking for. Okay, so when you're working with fresh garlic and you're dealing with a whole clove situation, what I like to do is just cut off both tips. Okay, cutting off both tips, and then I'm going to use the flat side of the knife to press down on the garlic gently so that it smashes it just a little bit, and that makes it easy to peel. The peeling starts to come off, and I can just grab it and roll the peeling off. Sometimes it sticks. You know, sometimes it can be a real pain to get the skin off the garlic, but that can really help when you smash it like that. And then you just roll off the peeling. So I have one very small clove of garlic now. And you can throw as many as you want in there. You know, if you don't like a lot of garlic. I mean, if you don't like garlic at all, you can leave it out. If you just like a little bit, you can throw a couple cloves in there. If you like a lot, you can put a dozen cloves in there. It doesn't really make a difference. It's just you're going to put an amount of garlic in there to taste. So I'm going to take a few minutes here to cut up my garlic. I didn't do this ahead of time because I just wanted to share the whole experience with you guys. We're just hanging out, making some hummus and falafel. No big whoop. And then I'm going to have to do this again for the hummus because there's a bunch of garlic that goes into the hummus too. Now, here's a little tip for you. And the first time I heard this, I was like, what? Come on. And I don't understand the science behind this, but if there's one thing I hate about working with fresh garlic, it's having garlicky fingers all damn day, and it doesn't even want to wash off with soap. But here's like it's like a frickin' magic trick. If you have garlicky fingers, rub it on stainless steel. Okay, your faucet, this pan, just rub your fingers, any part that's exposed to the garlic on that stainless steel. And I don't know why, but it totally works. You know, if we have any scientists in the house, they could probably explain why. But I don't know why. I just know that it works. So if you didn't know about that little tip about working with fresh garlic, you know, it's pretty freaking cool. Scriptlin, good morning and welcome. Cooking stream, yeah, only the second cooking stream I've ever done. And I'm doing a different setup than last time. Last time I had the split screen setup because I had like a close-up camera and a wide shot. And I was actually setting that up again last night. But you know what? I was like, this actually works. And what's cool is I've got my phone camera on a tripod and I can, if I want to do a close-up, I can just grab it and move it in. All right, so cut both ends off the garlic, take the flat side of the knife, push down on it, and that makes the peeling start to come off, and it's very easy to peel that way. And I'm going to add a very good amount of garlic to our falafel. If you are new to the show, if you're kind of randomly popping in, I am not a professional chef. I am a professional jackwagon. I am a career streamer, but cooking is not what I normally stream. This is only my second time, and but I do love to cook. And but I normally stream a video game called Dungeons and Dragons Online. It's like an MMORPG version of the old tabletop role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. So it's a World of Warcraft style game. But once in a while, I'll stream my other hobbies: bowling, walking in the woods, picking mushrooms and berries, or, you know, how to make hummus live streams. And I imagine, you know, that the how to make hummus live stream, maybe that's something we can do once a year. So again, when I'm working with the fresh garlic, I'm cutting off the very tips of both ends of the clove and just brushing that aside. That's throw it in the trash. And then I'm taking the flat side of the knife and just pushing down lightly on the clove. That starts to break it apart, starts to crush it, and then it's very easy to pull the peeling off because you don't want that peeling in your food. That will be unpleasant. And I'm planning for today's show to be about 2 hours long. After we make the falafel, we actually have to let it sit for an hour. So during that time, I'm just going to stare at the camera and run my fingers through my beard. No, I'm just kidding. While that's sitting, that's when we're going to make the hummus. There's a little light back here, actually. If that makes things any better. Does that make things better, or is that too harsh? Dan wrote, rubbing fingers on stainless steel removes garlic odor because sulfur compounds in garlic bind to iron in stainless steel, forming odorless complexes. That's awesome. Thank you, Gan, for, I don't know if you knew that or if you looked it up, but that's pretty cool to know that. I knew it had to be something like that. I mean, I took a chemistry class or two in high school and college, but that was a long time ago. You prefer without the light? Okay, I'm gonna turn it off. Thanks for saying. Yeah, it did look like it might have been a little bit harsh. I think the lighting is actually pretty good in here for this. In fact, I've got there's two more sources of lighting that I can use in here, and I only need the one, really. We have a lot of natural lighting coming through too. Pador says, as a chemist, I can confirm what Gan said. I didn't know you were a chemist, Pador. That's really cool. It's really cool to hear about what you guys do. You know, a lot of you I've known for years. Some of you, I know like Bertle's a truck driver, for example. But, I don't know everything about you guys. So I appreciate hearing. Okay, what else? What else? What else? I'm gonna rinse my fingers off a little bit. They're very sticky from working with the fresh garlic. Salt to taste. I'm just gonna put a teaspoon of salt in there. Table salt, no big whoop. It's a little bit heaping. 1 tablespoon of ground black pepper. I'm probably gonna start sneezing now. I typically do when I work with pepper. And 1 tablespoon of ground cumin. Oh man, I love cumin. It is maybe my favorite spice. Just gonna wipe off the tablespoon so we don't get any bits of pepper in our cumin. I'm getting low on cumin. There we go. 1 tablespoon of ground coriander. Coriander is actually cilantro. It's the spice version of cilantro. The fresh cilantro was the greeny leafy stuff. Coriander, I guess it's just, dried and processed into a powder. Okay, so that's about a tablespoon. Doesn't have to be exact. If you really like the flavor of cumin or coriander or whatever in your falafel, you can certainly put more of it in there. Okay, now the recipe calls for, the recipes I'm using are pinned to the top of chat. It calls for 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. But Uncle Voodoo likes things spicy. So we're going to use 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper, 3 teaspoons of cayenne pepper. When I make it for my sister, she doesn't like spicy things. I stop at 2. But I always use more than the recipe calls for. Okay, so let's see. You know what else I like to do? The recipe doesn't call for it, but I like to put a little bit of turmeric in there. Turmeric is a very mild spice. It's not going to affect the flavor. Turmeric is supposed to be really, really good for you. So whenever I can, I always sneak turmeric into my recipes if I know it's not going to affect the color or the flavor of it or something like that. So I like to put a few shakes of turmeric in there. Okay, I think that's all of the main ingredients except for the chickpeas. Looks like we're good to go. So these are just dried chickpeas that I've rehydrated overnight with a couple of tea. This is 2 cups dry measure of dried chickpeas that you can get at basically any grocery store. Most grocery stores are going to have a section of bagged dried beans, right? Just get a bag of dried chickpeas. Do not use this, okay? The first time I ever tried making falafel 20 years ago, I used this. And something happened that was so discouraging that I didn't try to make falafel again for like 20 years. And that is that, once I had the batter all made up and I put it in my oil, it just fell apart and it was just useless, and I'm like, "Oh man, that sucks. I suck." But I was encouraged to try making falafel from scratch again because I read in that recipe that's posted at the top of chat exactly why that happens is because you use canned chickpeas. You get a very different consistency out of that, and for whatever reason, they just don't want to hold together well in the falafel recipe. So I was talking with somebody earlier this week when I was talking about doing this live stream, and they said they had that same problem too. You want to use dried chickpeas that you hydrate overnight. And the baking soda, I've heard that it makes them more tender. I've also heard that it removes the gassy compounds. When you eat beans, you tend to be a little gassy. So I don't, again, I'm not a chemist, so maybe Paydor can even speak to that. Maybe Paydor could tell us why baking soda is often added to dried beans when you rehydrate them. I don't know why, but I just do it. But those are the two reasons I've heard. Krieg, good afternoon and welcome. We're just about to start whipping up our falafel. You went to Michigan Tech. Oh, Chief, yeah, I knew you went to Michigan Tech. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to drain these and rinse them thoroughly because I want to make sure I rinse, any remnants of baking soda off of the chickpeas. So I just need a minute to go over to the sink and rinse these. Pardon me for a moment. All right. Chickpeas that have been hydrated overnight. Technically, mine were sitting for a couple of days. And by the way, if you're lazy like me, what happens is you have aspirational, motivations of I'm going to make hummus tomorrow. So you put on your chickpeas to soak overnight, and the next day you're feeling too lazy to make the hummus. Don't worry. You could let your chickpeas sit in that water as long as they're covered for days. Maybe after 3 or 4 days, change the water out so it doesn't get skunky and they don't get slimy. Okay, but I mean, yeah, I've let them sit for 3 or 4 days with no problem. I've actually had them soaked for a week before, but like I said, after about 3 or 4 days, if you haven't used them yet, change out the water that they're covered with. Okay, so don't worry if you didn't get to it the next day. Your chickpeas won't be bad. So now I'm just going to take our rinsed chickpeas that were soaked overnight and I'm going to put it in the food processor. But because it's kind of full right now and the herbs are taking up so much space, I'm just going to zip it a few times real quick so that it starts to break it down, make a little bit more room in there for us. Because what happens if you just put the whole bunch, that's why I quartered the onion and I coarsely chopped the herbs because if you just put everything whole in there, it might not want to blend very well, and that can be frustrating. So just to make sure that we blend really well, I'm just gonna coarsely chop it up in there, and that's gonna help it blend better. Okay, so now I'm gonna add my rehydrated chickpeas. I just use tap water. We're on well water here. We actually have really good water here at this place. I love the water here. It's just so pure and delicious, But yeah, I've lived in houses that had like high iron in the water. I've lived in houses that had high sulfur in the water, and that's really disgusting. So, if your tap water, I've lived in Phoenix where the tap water came out with frickin' floaties in it back in the 80s, so you know, it just depends where you live, but our tap water here is freaking phenomenal. Okay, so should we give you a closer look? No, that's not. That's all my or all my ingredients in the food processor. All right. You're going to process this for a few minutes, okay? You're not going to over process this, so don't worry about leaving it on too long. You're not going to hurt the recipe if you have to walk away and you've got a phone call and you forgot about it and it was processing for 10 minutes, you know. Probably your biggest danger of letting it process for that long would be that your food processor might catch on fire if you run it that long. Okay, so I've got some bits that are, not falling down real well. So I'm just going to stop it and I'm going to run the spatula that I got from Spatula City. Nothing says love like a spatula. And I'm just going to, get it down there a little bit, put the lid back on, fire it back up. Bell, good morning and welcome. No, we're not making waffles today. Sorry, buddy. We are making authentic hummus and falafel. Right now, we're doing the falafel. Both are chickpea based. I love chickpeas. I know some people think they're chalky. We are not using canned chickpeas. We're using dried chickpeas that we rehydrated overnight. I make so much hummus and and falafel. I'm going to show you guys how I buy my chickpeas. Here's how I buy my chickpeas. This is I don't know, it's like a 12-pound bag or something. It doesn't even say. But in any event, I go through a lot of chickpeas, so you don't have to buy a giant sack of chickpeas. You can just go get a 1-pound bag from the grocery store. I got this from Amazon, so they don't have anything like that. I live in a rural area. We don't have a lot of good stores in the area, so I end up having get a lot of my stuff from Amazon. Okay, I'm just going to use the spatula again to get this stuff down from the sides. Make sure that it's nice and blended. And it's probably done right now, but I'm just going to let it go for another minute. Like I said, you can't over process this, so don't worry. It's going to be just fine. Yeah, Chief, totally. We just got like a basic grocery store called Family Fare, and then there's a Walmart as well. I can get a lot of stuff from those places, but there's definitely some things like, like I like to get a lot of organic. So like if I have to buy spices, I'll buy, like organic coriander from Amazon. Or, like the chickpeas are actually organic as well, and you can't get a lot of organics here in town. Not everything we're using today is organic, but I try to use it when I can. All right, that should be plenty blended. I'm going to show you what that looks like now. It's just almost like a paste. It's just like a mash. And that is our falafel batter. Okay, so now what I actually need to let this stuff set for an hour. So I'm going to um, spoon this stuff out into a bowl. You need to let it sit for an hour in the refrigerator. And I don't know exactly why that is. It might be so that it just stays together better. I'm just following the recipe. I don't know what would happen if you tried to cook it right away. And while that's setting for an hour, that's when we're going to make the hummus. And then after the hummus is done, we'll go and retrieve this out of the refrigerator. There's a couple more ingredients we'll have to add to it real quick, and then we're going to fry it up. I love falafel. I'll bet a lot of you have never even had it. It's a traditional Middle Eastern dish. First time I had it, I was in my mid 20s. I was working at the GM Tech Center in Warren, Michigan as an engineering intern. And the group was going out to one of the local Middle Eastern eateries. And at that point in my life, I never had any kind of food like that. Like I grew up, I told you guys, like my mom was a casserole mom. And I just had really basic stuff like that when I was growing up, if not TV dinners. And so, now I love ethnic foods. You guys know I love Thai food, Jamaican food, Middle Eastern food, Indian food. That's my favorite stuff now, but I never had that stuff as a kid growing up. And so I was at this Middle Eastern restaurant, and the reason why I asked for the falafel is because it said a traditional, Lebanese dish or whatever. I remember the word traditional, and I was like, well, I want to try whatever's traditional around here. Because I didn't know what any of the food on the menu was, so it said traditional, so I went for it, and that was the first time I ever had falafel. And I've loved it ever since. And I like to use it. It can be served over a bed of rice, just the balls over a bed of rice, or I prefer to have it as part of a wrap. Like in a pita, we're actually going to be using tortilla, but you can use pita if you prefer. It's whatever you like. And we're going to have lots of goodies to go in that wrap too. So what I'm doing now is I'm just replacing the base, and I'm going to just give it a pulse to get as much stuff off the blade as possible. So now my blade is mostly clean. I'm actually going to rinse this off real quick because I don't want it to dry, and that's going to be that much harder to clean. Because it's still wet, I can just give it a quick rinse and not have to thoroughly wash it before we make the hummus, because we're going to use the same food processor for the hummus. Pardon me a sec. All right. And I'm going to use my spatula to get the rest of the falafel out of the bottom of the food processor. This is all healthy stuff in here. I talked about the importance of eating healthy foods when you're on break as a streamer, because it's very easy to fall into a rut when we're streamers and we're going on our quick 5-minute breaks every hour. And it's good to take a break. Don't sit there and play your game. For all of us need to take a break, guys. Don't sit there and play your game for 4 hours. That's very unhealthy. It's very easy just to get up, walk around, stretch the legs a little bit, get the blood flowing. You can get, I mean, that's a serious thing. You can get like blood clots, and, most of us here are gamers. Most of us are pretty serious gamers. So I care about your health, guys. And, I'm not trying to lecture anybody about being healthy. It's just that, that's a very easy thing to do. It's very easy just to get up and walk around for a couple of minutes, without putting yourself out. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go put this in the refrigerator. So here is the falafel that's, everything's in there. There's 2 more ingredients we're going to add right before we cook it. But I'm just going to go put this in the fridge for an hour while we make the hummus. So pardon me for a moment. All right. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my food processor a quick rinse. And let's see. No, 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 no. Okay, yes, because I don't want it to dry. All right, I'm going to give this a quick rinse. I'll be right back. All right, got that over on the drying towel. And we'll get back to the food processor here in a bit. Okay, what are we going to do next? Normally, I'm not making these two things at the same time, but I'm trying to, normally what I'd do if I was cooking this on my own is, I might just go take a break while that sits in the refrigerator for an hour or something. But, I don't want I can't do that when I'm live streaming, right? So I'm trying to, intertwine the two recipes without having a lot of dead space. Okay. Now I've got this is another batch of dried chickpeas. So now we're going to get onto the hummus and we're tabling the falafel for an hour while, it's sitting in the refrigerator. So this is just 2 cups dry measure chickpeas. Super, super important that when you use, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to just rinse these off very thoroughly. And then I'm going to put them in this pan with 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So pardon me for a moment. All right, I didn't have to super thoroughly rinse them because we're going to be giving them another very thorough rinse after they cook. Now I'm just going to take 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Clean off my teaspoon here because it's got bits of the other spices that we used. Just 1 teaspoon of baking soda this time. Just pop it on there. And now I'm just going to cover this with water. Okay, so it's just chickpeas with a teaspoon of baking soda covered with water. And I'm going to turn the burner on to high. And then I'm going to give it a quick stir to stir in that baking soda. We'll be rinsing that all out before we start making our hummus. And this is going to take probably a good 20 to 30 minutes for these to cook. This is one of the subjective parts of making hummus is when you're cooking your chickpeas, you want to make sure that you don't overcook them, because if you overcook them, you could end up with chickpea soup, and you don't want chickpea soup, okay? Your chickpeas need to stay intact. If they start breaking apart, you could be losing too much of the body of the chickpeas, and that can really affect the finished product. So, when they start to get, after about 20 minutes or something, what you're going to want to do is just, get a slotted spoon like this or something, grab a couple of the chickpeas out, run them under cool water so you don't burn your mouth, and then just eat them. And, if they still feel hard, then you just want to let them go for a little bit longer. Sometimes the inside can be a little bit hard. So this is kind of a subjective part, but you just want to make sure they have a nice, even, softer consistency. Eating, you can eat these chickpeas like right now. They're just soaking overnight. You can eat them just like that. It's not going to hurt you. So I don't want you to worry about, eating undercooked things or something like that. Everything that we're preparing today, it's actually all, there's no meat, eggs, or dairy in any of this stuff, so it's not going to go rancid on you or something like that, or you don't have to worry about, I like the falafel batter. I could just eat that raw. It might not be very pleasant, but it's not going to hurt me. Stu, good morning and welcome. Yep, sodium bicarbonate is baking soda, I think. There's, yeah, not to be confused with baking powder, which is similar, but a little bit different uses. I'm not a baker. I do a little bit of baking, but that's definitely not my forte. And so, I can't sit here and tell you about like the differences between the two and why you would use one versus the other, how much salt you have to use, etc. if I'm baking, I'm following a recipe, but I don't really understand the science of baking. Baking is definitely more of an exact science than cooking. When it comes to cooking, a lot of times, exact measures are not important at all. Sometimes when you're dealing with certain spices, for example, that may be very strong, you wouldn't want to like accidentally double the amount of, you know, or let's say your recipe called for like a teaspoon of nutmeg, right? And you accidentally put a tablespoon of nutmeg in your recipe. That's probably going to ruin it, right? Because nutmeg is very, very strong, and it's probably going to be overpowering in your finished finished product. But other spices are much more forgiving, like cumin. If you accidentally put a tablespoon of cumin in your recipe instead of a teaspoon, it's probably not going to ruin it. I'd probably like it better. I love cumin. Okay, so what are we going to do while our chickpeas are cooking? Well, we've got a lot of prep work to do with the other ingredients, so let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to get my food processor back over here now that I've rinsed it and let it sit on the drying towel for a few minutes. Another little tip that I actually only learned recently. So I'm the kind of person that if I put my chickpeas on to boil, I'm not going to sit here and watch it, right? I'm going to go play my game for a few minutes, right? And come back. And then what happens, right? You come back and it's boiled over and you're like, damn it! And it's a big mess, right? But a little trick that I learned recently is you can take a wooden spoon, put it over the top of your pot, and if it starts to boil over, that for whatever reason, brings it back down. So a little tip you can try on your own. Cosmic, good morning and welcome, or good afternoon and welcome. Yeah, it's the Hummus show today. That's okay. The VOD is going to stay available. So you didn't miss anything. What we've done so far is we've made the falafel batter anyways, and now it's sitting in the fridge, and now we're moving on to making our hummus. Both the recipes that I'm using today are pinned to the top of chat. They're not my recipes, so I take no credit for them, but these are the recipes that I use when I make hummus and falafel. Okay, so let's talk about some important steps when you're making authentic hummus, okay? And S Green, good morning and welcome. I love this setup. This setup is so much better than when I did the cooking show last year when I did the hummus show last year. So I've got my laptop right here. I can see you. I can see chat really well. I've got my phone on a tripod here, and I can actually move the tripod. I could actually do that wirelessly if I want to, and I have a lot of mobility with moving the camera around. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I want to thank you guys who support this show so very much because you made this possible. Not only do you make it possible for me to stream Dungeons and Dragons online every day, but because you support this show, I'm able to reinvest some of that into getting additional equipment like this laptop and this phone and the tripod and stuff. You know, if you guys didn't support this show, we wouldn't be able to do a cooking stream like this. Or the bowling streams or the walks in the woods and things like that. So because you support the show, it enables me to do some additional things like that. So thank you very much to everybody who supports the show. The show has an unlimited budget now? No, we're not quite there yet, Ken. Maybe someday, but we're quite a ways from that now. Okay, so when you're making your hummus, this is very, very, very important. As I said at the beginning of the stream, but I want to say it again now that we're actually getting to the hummus. So I have been making hummus for decades, and my gold standard for hummus is the authentic Middle Eastern eateries that are in the Detroit area. So I lived in the Detroit area for most of my life. It was where I was born and raised, and probably 3/4 of my life I lived down there. And Detroit has a huge, huge Middle Eastern population. And so as a result, there are lots of authentic Middle Eastern eateries in the Detroit area. And so that's my gold standard for foods like hummus and falafel is the stuff that I get at the authentic, Lebanese and Middle Eastern eateries in the Detroit area. So I know what really good authentic hummus tastes like, uh, made by folks who have been making it for generations. So that's my gold standard. Okay. And this hummus recipe was actually posted in one of the restaurants that I like to go to called La Marsa, which is a chain restaurant in the Detroit area. But they've actually expanded out to the outside the Detroit area. In fact, I even heard that they might be making a location way up here in Traverse City, which is only about 90 minutes from me, but probably too far to just go that. In any event, there's a whole, they might have 20 locations for all I know. And to me, their hummus, out of all the places in Detroit that I've eaten, their hummus is the best. And I've had hummus at a lot of different restaurants. There's another place that has multiple locations in the Detroit area called Palm Palace. Their hummus is pretty good too. A little on the tahini side there, but sometimes you get hummus that's really middle of the road. So the place that I stopped on the way to Gen Con, Woody's in Lansing, like I don't think their hummus is that great. It's to me it's middle of the road. It's also too lemony, and if I'm at a point I am fanatical about hummus. And I if I taste somebody's hummus, I can pick out like the lemon concentration of it. I can pick out, the how much tahini, was there enough tahini in there or too much tahini, these kinds of things. And then the garlic content and stuff like that. So, a refined palate for hummus. All right, so our chickpeas are boiling now. I'm going to turn down my heat to just below medium. You can see that it's getting a little foamy. Okay, don't worry about that. What I'm going to do is just skim some of that off, just because, it can get pretty rowdy. So I'm just going to skim some of that foam off. Okay, no big whoop. I don't know why things get foamy when you cook, dried beans like that, but maybe our local chemist can tell us. Oh, the wine here. This is great. We have some extra time, so I can indulge you with some anecdotes. Um, because we've got to wait an hour before we can use that falafel. So, uh, yeah, I like to have a glass of wine once in a while, but not very often. Once or maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, I might have a glass of wine or two. And sometimes I even get a little kick where maybe a few nights in a row I might have a glass of wine. But I live with my 80-year-old father, and he is OCD. And when you're OCD, you can't sleep at night if one of these is empty. Okay, so if I finish off a bottle of wine and there's an empty slot, guess what happens? My dad will immediately buy another one because the wine rack has to be full. Even though my dad doesn't even drink wine, the wine rack has to be full because he's OCD. It'll drive him crazy if there's a slot without a wine bottle in it. So my dad buys the wine, and I don't have discriminating taste when it comes to wine. When it comes to hummus, I have very discriminating taste. But when it comes to wine, as much as I love it, I like my wine like I like my women, cheap and sweet. So, $3 or $4 a bottle, pink Moscato is good enough for me. No, it's not fancy wine that's back here. Anyways, yeah. So from time to time during my streams, I've talked about my OCD father. He will notice, anything out of place, right? And he's not a neat freak. He's not that everything has to be real clean, but everything's got to be in its place. You know what I mean? So like we have this pantry room over here, and it looks like the grocery store shelves. Like every single can, the label is facing perfect. Everything's aligned. The labels are all facing perfectly, out. And if it was me, I just put them up any old way. I don't care. But he's got to have everyone facing the same direction, perfectly aligned. And if he goes in there and it's not, he'll just fix it. It doesn't upset him. Like he doesn't start screaming and yelling about why is this can turned a little bit, but he will put it in its place. If he goes sits down at his table and his little pencil holder or something has been moved, he'll move it back, just a little quarter inch because it's a quarter inch out of place. So anyways, I guess one of the benefits of having an OCD father that you live with is he keeps the wine rack full. All right, so we just got our chickpeas at a nice simmer right now, and they're going to probably take another 15 to 20 minutes to cook. Okay, so when you're making authentic hummus, this is super, super, super important. Never, ever, ever, ever use this. Okay? Talked about this at the beginning of the show, but now that we're doing hummus, I want to talk about it again. Do not use chickpeas from a can. Okay? If you're watching a video and somebody's showing you how to make hummus and they use this, turn that video off right then and there. Okay? If you want to make hummus with with canned chickpeas, I'm not going to stop you. All right? So stop writing that angry forum post right now. Food is forcing me not to use canned chickpeas. No, I'm not. Okay? But if you want the real deal, if you want to take your hummus to the next level, do not use this. Use this. Dried chickpeas that are available from just about any grocery store in the dry bean section, okay? And it doesn't take, you just need to rehydrate it overnight. Lizzie, good afternoon and welcome. Uli Kumis, good afternoon and welcome. You just need to, cover them with water, couple teaspoons of baking soda, let it set overnight, no big deal, okay? This is very, very important. Now, if you're not used to the difference between canned chickpeas and dried chickpeas, and that may sound like a trivial difference, and that didn't occur to me. When I was new to making hummus, I didn't understand the difference between those two things. I was just using canned chickpeas, and man, my hummus just never turned out as good as the stuff I was getting in the restaurants in Detroit, and it was very frustrating. I didn't understand. But if you don't understand the difference between dried chickpeas and canned chickpeas, think about the difference between like canned green beans versus fresh green beans, or canned green beans versus frozen green beans. Huge difference, right? Frozen or fresh green beans can be crispy and have a very different texture than canned green beans, which are kind of mushy, right? Or canned corn versus frozen corn versus fresh corn, right? That's kind of like the difference between canned chickpeas and dried chickpeas that you rehydrate, okay? So very, very, very important that you're going to use dried chickpeas that you rehydrate overnight. And as I was saying before, it's okay if you don't get to it the next day. If you set your chickpeas to soak, the night before and you're like, man, I'm just too busy today. I can't get to making my hummus. You don't need to throw them out. You can let them sit for days. If you let it, after about 3 or 4 days, I would recommend changing the water so they don't start getting like slimy and skunky. Okay, just change out the water. Just rinse them out, cover them with water. I've left them sitting for a week. I changed the water out in the middle. But yeah, I've had my chickpeas soaking for a week sometimes because I'm lazy, and I suffer from aspirational thinking sometimes, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make hummus tomorrow. So I go soak my chickpeas overnight, and then the next day I'm like, oh, I don't feel like doing anything. So don't worry about it if you don't get to it right away. Your chickpeas won't go bad on you. You've got days of extra time. Okay. Chickpeas are still cooking. Another very, very important thing when you're making excellent, authentic hummus is, oh man, I forgot to grab something. Pardon me for a second. So another really, really important thing when you're making authentic hummus is this: lemon juice from a bottle. Never, ever, 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 ever use this. okay? Not for your hummus, all right? You want to put that on your salad, you want to use that in baking recipes, great. Do not use that in your hummus. And this is another subtle difference that when you're new to making hummus, when I was new to making hummus 25 years ago, I didn't understand the difference between bottled lemon juice and lemon juice that comes from a lemon, okay? I just thought they were the same thing. But there is a huge difference between lemon juice from a bottle and lemon juice from a fresh lemon, okay? Fresh lemon juice is a lot more mild, whereas lemon juice from a bottle is pretty caustic. It's pretty rough. And we're actually going to be putting like 3/4 of a cup to a full cup of fresh lemon juice in our hummus. And, you might be thinking a cup of lemon juice in your hummus? That sounds like it would be overpowering. It would be if you used bottled lemon juice, it would ruin your hummus. But fresh lemon juice is a completely different thing than bottled lemon juice. So do not use bottled lemon juice when you're making your hummus. We're gonna juice these lemons right now with my citrus press. Well, in a few minutes. Okay. So those two things are huge. So making authentic tasting hummus isn't about some big secret or special ingredient or magical ingredient or it's nothing like that. It's just knowing things like using dried chickpeas, using fresh lemon juice, using fresh garlic and not, something got out of a jar or garlic powder or something like that. You're just getting here. Both of the recipes that I'm showing you today are linked at the top of chat. I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit because the boil is a little bit more aggressive than I want. Okay, so the next ingredient that I'm going to show you is tahini. Some of you may not know what tahini is. Tahini is sesame seed butter. Okay, so it's a lot like peanut butter, but it's made with sesame seeds and actually has the consistency of like natural peanut butter. If you've ever had natural peanut butter before, sometimes, the oil separates, so you have like a layer of oil at the top and it's thicker at the bottom and you got to stir it up. Tahini is the same way. Some brands are more homogenized and the oil doesn't separate, but the brand that I use actually does separate. This is something that, locally I think Walmart has like one brand of tahini in little jars, so like I don't want to go buy a bunch of little jars of tahini. So I buy my tahini by the bucket off of Amazon. Don's Early Light, good afternoon and welcome. Okay, and I'm going to open this up to show you what it looks like. Okay, so you can see it's just, I've already mixed this up a little bit last night, so the oil's not separated. And this, I'm almost done with this bucket, but you can see, it does move around. Okay, it's not so solid. Like you couldn't do that with peanut butter, right? If you shook peanut butter, it's just going to stay there, right? So using a good tahini is important. You don't want to, sometimes you can go to health food stores and they have bulk areas, and they have like bulk tahini and a bucket of it and you just scoop it out, and that stuff can like harden up and you just get the bottom and it's like freaking, it's like it's worse than spackle. It's so hard. You want to stay away from that stuff. Get yourself a nice light roasted tahini that's thinner, and your tahini should pour. If your tahini doesn't pour, it's no good. But you might need to mix it up to get there. Like this, when I get this stuff, the bottom is settled. Then there's like kind of a middle layer, and then there's the top oil layer. Okay, so what I do is that you can just use a hand mixer or something. It's pretty labor intensive to do it with a spoon, but if you just had a little jar of tahini, that might make more sense. When I have a jar of tahini, I'll just take the same electric mixer, but put one paddle in it and put the one paddle down into the jar and mix it up. Jester, good afternoon and welcome. I agree, good afternoon and welcome. So this is already mixed, but I want to show you that, tahini can be different colors. So I have another bucket that I just ordered that is, I didn't even realize when I ordered it, but it was it's from the same company, but it's just a different variety that they have, and I'm going to show you that. So this bucket of tahini says Ethiopian tahini, And I'm not a tahini expert, but I have tried a lot of different. This says pepperwood. Tahini extra from Lebanon Valley is a really good kind of tahini that I know that some of the authentic Middle Eastern eateries that I eat at in Detroit, I know they use it. Some of them use it. Okay, so I just want to show you that. So here's the first tahini that I showed you. Notice that it is a bit dark, okay? And this tahini is a lot lighter in color. So I'm just showing you that you can have color variation in tahini, okay? Now, you don't need to buy tahini by the bucket like I do. It's just that I use a lot of it because I like to make hummus a lot, and I live in a small town, and we just don't have a lot of good food choices. And literally, the only tahini in town is like a little jar of it at Walmart, and I don't want to have to go buy, a whole bunch of jars. It's actually cheaper for me to just buy it by the bucket off of Amazon. You know nothing about tahini. Again, it's sesame seed butter, so very similar to something like peanut butter or almond butter, except it's made with sesame seeds. And it actually has a nice nutty flavor to it. You can eat it just like this. So here's some tahini on my finger, and it has a really nice flavor to it. And you can use this for other things too. I like to make like a salad dressing out of this stuff. And you can just take tahini, water, and lemon juice, mix those together, and you got a really nice, creamy salad dressing without a bunch of preservatives that you can make really, really fast. Tahini, water, and lemon juice. Okay. And I'll just get like a pickle jar or something, put a half a cup of tahini in it, put some water in there, a teaspoon of lemon juice, shake it up, mix it up, and it'll actually thicken up a lot. So you might need to add more water. You can just add an amount of water to it, to the consistency you like. I like a thinner, but you might like a thicker dressing. So, the salad dressings that we get from the store are just loaded with sugar and preservatives and a bunch of crap. And so this is just a very fast homemade salad dressing. Again, tahini, water, lemon juice that you can make at home real quick when you have tahini on hand, and you can feel good about it that it's not loaded with sugars and preservatives. And if you like a sweeter salad dressing, you could even put some kind of sweetener in that too. You could put a little bit of agave nectar or something in there, or some kind of I don't know, fruity thing or something. And you can definitely get more um, more extravagant. You could put bits of parsley or cilantro. There's lots of things you could add to that. In fact, at the link for the falafel recipe that we're using, there's actually a link there for that woman's tahini dressing recipe that has a lot more stuff in it. But, you know, sometimes I'm lazy and I just want to do something quick and simple. So tahini, water, lemon juice, shake it up. I'm good to go. Yeah, you could use honey, whatever you want, as if you like a little bit of sweetener in it, because you like a sweeter salad dressing, you could do that for sure. Nope. You can eat whatever you want, Jester. But this show is all about, helping you taking your hummus game to the next level. And once you learn how to make good hummus, if you're somebody who likes store-bought hummus, like Sabra or something, once you learn how to make good hummus on your own, you're never going to want to touch that stuff again because that stuff is going to be garbage to you. Now, Sabra to me is probably about the best nationally distributed brand in the United States. There's definitely better like local brands, but in terms of like national distribution, I think Sabra is probably one of the best, but it doesn't hold a candle to the real deal. Fresh, authentic hummus is so next level. Okay, what can we do next? So, oil. We're going to use oil. This is something else that when I was a younger man, I didn't understand the difference between these two things. This is extra virgin olive oil. This is regular olive oil, a light extra light taste, it says, okay? We're going to be using regular extra light olive oil, not extra virgin. This is much stronger in flavor. You do not want to make your hummus with extra virgin olive oil. You want to go with the regular light tasting olive oil. Okay, otherwise that extra virgin strong flavor is going to end up in your hummus. Okay, some people like to drizzle the extra virgin over their hummus at the end. That's a traditional way to serve it. And if you like doing that, that's fine. I prefer my hummus without the oil drizzle on it. But, that's just a personal preference. Out of time 69. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome. So we're going to use regular olive oil. In a pinch, you can use another light tasting oil like canola oil. I've used that before, but olive oil is more traditional. Okay, so we're going to use 4 tablespoons. That's a quarter cup. Let's see. I've got a measuring cup right here. So I'm just gonna measure out a quarter cup of olive oil. Okay, and we're gonna put that in our food processor. And man, I've been yakking for a while. I thought it'd be further along. I'm actually going to test these chickpeas to see how close they are to being done. I think they actually might be done. I think they might be actually a little bit overdone. Yeah, our chickpeas are totally done. I need to drain and rinse these, pardon me, for a minute. You want to make sure you thoroughly rinse them at this point because you want to get all the excess baking soda out of there. All right. So now we've got our cooked chickpeas, and I don't know how well you can see it, but the skins are there, and I'm not going to worry about, trying to get rid of those skins. I've got some water in here. Let me just give it another quick drain. And it's okay if there's a little bit of water in there because we're going to be adding water to our hummus anyways. We're actually going to be adding ice to our hummus, and I'll talk about that later. But I'm emphasizing that I'm not worried about the peels. Okay? Misfit, good afternoon and welcome. Because some hummus makers swear up and down 6 ways to Sunday that you need to peel your chickpeas in order to get creamy hummus. I assure you that is absolutely not true. Now, the whole peeling your chickpeas things, if I had to guess, it probably came from the days before food processors, when people had to make hummus with, in like a mortar and pestle, and they're manually mashing it up, right? But we've got food processors today. But even, I've actually watched videos of people who are showing you how to make hummus with a food processor, telling you that you need to peel your chickpeas to get creamy hummus. I'm guessing that, some people, the thing is, you want to make sure you use a decent food processor. You don't want to use like one of those mini food processors that might be a little bit weaker, or something like a hand blender or a magic bullet or a hand mixer, or if you're using something like that, or even a blender, certain kinds of blenders might struggle. Also, the amount of water or ice that you're using also affects the creaminess of it as well. So I suspect that it's one of those factors that those hummus makers are dealing with, not thinking that it has something to do with peeling our chickpeas, but even if you had just a halfway decent food processor. And as I said before, I used to use a $20 garage, or excuse me, actually a $5 garage sale special, but it was like $25 new, Hamilton Beach, that my mom got at a garage sale, years ago, and I used it for like a decade, and it was fine. I'm going to be using a Cuisinart. This is like a middle of the road, middle option Cuisinart. It's a pretty good brand, but I just got this a couple of years ago, and I was just using a super cheapie before that, and it was just fine. Okay, so don't waste your time peeling your chickpeas, folks. It's just a silly waste of time, and it is absolutely not necessary to get smooth, creamy hummus. You're not going to have bits of your peels in there. It's not going to change the flavor. So we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to wait on the chickpeas because I'm going to talk about another tip that some people tell you to do in order to get creamy hummus, and you can experiment with this if you want. And that is, some people will say to go ahead and put all the other ingredients in first and blend that together before you add your chickpeas. I don't do that. I'm just letting you know that you can experiment with that if you like. Plum Slinger, good afternoon and welcome. Okay, so now I'm going to take 1 cup of tahini. Again, the sesame seed butter that I showed you before, which I buy by the bucket online. It's okay if your tahini isn't super mixed. If you get little chunks of it, that's okay. You know, you do want to mix it up before using it, but if it's not perfect, don't stress because your food processor is going to blend it up. Okay. 1 cup of tahini, sesame seed butter. All right. Now we're going to add our lemon juice. And as I said before, you want to make sure you're using fresh lemons. Do not use lemon juice from a bottle. That will ruin your hummus. I can't emphasize it enough. It may seem like a trivial difference if you're not used to the difference between bottled lemon juice and fresh lemon juice. Fresh lemon juice is so much smoother. So we're going to go like 3/4 of a cup-ish, maybe up to a cup. We might add a little bit more because the amount of lemon juice that you use, you know, the quality of the lemons and things, you know, I'm sure there's different variables like the acidity and stuff like that. I'm not an expert on that, but you know, you're going to get some batch variation. You know, every time I make this hummus, it doesn't taste exactly the same as the previous time because again, like the quality of the lemons or you know whatever, different sources of chickpeas and stuff like that, you know, things are going to taste a little bit different. So the lemon juice is the kind of thing where, you know, I'll start with about 3/4 of a cup, but sometimes I might add a little bit more than that. So sometimes up to a cup. And that might sound like that's super overpowering. And if you put a cup of, you know, bottled lemon juice in your hummus, it's going to destroy it. But a cup of fresh lemon juice, completely different thing. So I'm going to take a few minutes to go ahead and cut up these lemons, and we're going to juice them right in our citrus press here. Some tahini dripping on my cutting board, so I'm gonna wipe that off. All right, so I just got lemon halves, and I'm gonna take a few minutes to press these. You don't have to get a fancy press like this. I found this at a second-hand shop in town. Actually, my dad found it at a second-hand shop in town last year, and he came home and he's like, "Weren't you looking for a nicer press?" Because I had a cheap press, but it was just about at the end of its life, and so I'd been looking, and something like this is about $75. I got it for 25 bucks at a second-hand shop. I heard a sub. Lugal, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for the sub. You're a 52-monther now. Thank you for all that support. The lemon rinds, by the way, don't throw these out. If you have a garbage disposal, you can throw these in the garbage disposal. Great way to freshen up and clean up your garbage disposal. Because, you know, garbage disposals can get kind of skunky. So throw the lemon rinds into your garbage disposal and run them through it. And that's a great way to freshen up your garbage disposal.
Use magic to kill death.
Good advice, folks. If that's an option for you, I'd recommend it, to use magic to kill death. That's Green. Thank you for the cheer. Uh-oh, are we gonna have a cooking hype train? Could happen. Okay, so I'm at just about a half a cup right now. So I'm gonna get rid of these. Well, actually, I'm gonna set them aside because here's the thing. Don't throw them out right away because if you get to a point with your finished product and you feel like you just need a little bit more lemon juice, you can usually by hand squeeze a few drops more of lemon juice out of those lemons. So set those aside until you're totally done with your hummus. All right, so I want a little bit more lemon juice. So I'm gonna cut up one more and see where we're at. By the way, if there's anybody randomly ending up on the channel because you saw I was at an in real life stream and you're like, what's this all about? Who's this guy? I don't normally stream IRL streams. This is just a special that I'm doing today. I am a full-time content creator and I do stream 6 days a week, but I stream a video game called Dungeons and Dragons Online, which is an MMORPG video game version of the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. And that's what I stream, about 40 hours a week. But once in a while, I stream my other hobbies too, like bowling, real life bowling, walking in the woods and talking about mushrooms and berries and flowers and stuff. And this is only my second time ever doing a cooking live stream. So I don't normally stream on Sundays either, but that's the one day a week that I don't normally stream. But if we have an above average standout week of support, I do a whole bonus stream on Sunday as my way of saying thank you for all the great support. We had a big week this week, so I thank you so much for that. That's why I'm doing this show today. All right. Okay, where are we at? We're at about 2/3 of a cup right now, so I'm going to cut up one more lemon. Last chance to save the hype train, because it's going bye-bye in 15 seconds. Okay, I'm at exactly 3/4 of a cup right now, so that's going to be my starting point. I might add a little bit later after we taste test it at the end, but I've got 3/4 of a cup of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Always use fresh squeezed lemon juice for your hummus. Never lemon juice from a bottle. If I hear that you're using lemon juice from a bottle, I'm going to call the hummus police on you. If you do use lemon juice from a bottle or chickpeas from a can, don't tell anybody you got the recipe from me because I'll deny it. All right, so right now we've got our olive oil, we've got our tahini, and we've got our lemon juice in there. Now the recipe calls for 1.5 to 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm definitely going to err to the lesser side. I don't want my hummus to be too salty. When it comes to salt, too much salt can ruin a dish, right? You can always add more, but you can't take it out, okay? Lemon juice, though, is a really good balancer. If you ever get something, if one of your dishes is a little too salty, you can try adding some lemon juice in it to cool it, to chill that salt out. So there's 1 teaspoon of salt, and then I'm just gonna half-ass measure about 1/2 teaspoon. Not actually using a 1/2 teaspoon, just filling up a teaspoon about halfway. Okay, so I'm gonna put 1.5 teaspoons. If I want to put more in at the end, then I will. Okay, now I got to get the garlic in there. I'm setting all these rinds aside because, again, at the end, if we decide we want our hummus to be a little bit more lemony, I can just by hand squeeze a few more drops of lemon juice out of each of these. So don't throw these away right away. They're great for squeezing a little bit more lemon juice out of if you feel like you want it at the end. Okay, so now I've got to cut up some more garlic. And I was showing you this earlier when we were making the, wow, this stream is already almost 2 hours, and I thought the whole stream would be 2 hours, but we're not even close to being done yet, guys, because we still gotta cook our falafel. So I think we're going to be going probably at least another 45 minutes. Thank you all for hanging out with me. This has been a lot of fun so far, and I love sharing this with you guys because, as I've said before, I love to cook, and I'm not a professional chef, but I love to cook, and I love the biggest part of that experience is sharing the food with others. And so I'm really happy to be sharing my favorite hummus and falafel recipes with you today. Okay, so when you're using fresh garlic, don't use it from a jar. Don't use any garlic powder. Fresh garlic in your hummus, very important. I like to cut off both ends, just the tips, okay? And then we're gonna use the flat side of the knife, and we're just gonna lightly push down and smash it a little bit. And what that does is it starts to, it smashes it, and it makes the skin start to come off. So now that skin is very easy to peel off. If you don't smash it, that skin is a pain in the butt to peel off. So there's one clove of garlic. This is organic garlic, and one of the things I hate about using organic garlic is that it's always smaller. The cloves are always so much smaller, and they're harder to work with, and you got to do so many more of them. Or if you get the conventional stuff, those cloves are a lot bigger. You might only put 3 or 4 cloves in those big conventional cloves of garlic, but with the organic stuff, at least around here, it's always a lot smaller than the regular. So I'm just cutting off the tips of both ends using the flat side of the knife to push down. That'll smash it a little bit, and that skin is easy to pull off. So we're going to take a few minutes to get about a good half dozen or so of these cloves in there. I don't even know what lamb sauce is, Lamb Slinger. I never heard of lamb sauce. Is that pureed lamb? I've heard of kibbe, which is minced lamb meat. I've never heard of lamb sauce. I don't think I've ever had lamb. Okay. Give it a little smash. Easy to peel off the skin. If you have any questions about these recipes, please ask. Or if you have any questions about my other hobbies, the outdoors, novels about tall ships, that sort of thing. But I am sharing with you one of my favorite hobbies, which is cooking, and one of the things that I'm most passionate about, which is authentic hummus. If you're new to the show, I am fanatical about hummus, and I tend to bring up the topic a lot during my regular DDO streams, and it's so bad that I have to make an effort to get myself to stop talking about it because I could have a whole 6-hour show every day where all I did was talk about hummus. What good hummus tastes like, the ingredients to use, what to eat it with, the kinds of food processors you. I mean, I'm just super super into hummus. And this is another food that I didn't have until I was into my mid to late 20s. I never had hummus growing up. My mom, when she was alive, she was a casserole mom. So when I was a kid, I was growing up with pretty basic stuff, casseroles and other recipes that she got out of her Better Homes and Gardens magazines and her Family Circle, magazines. And, there was a lot of TV dinners in my childhood too. So I didn't have a lot of of the sort of more elaborate home cooked meals. And when I was a senior in high school, I met my ex-wife, And her mother was an amazing cook. I'm not trying to throw my mom under the bus. Obviously, I love my mom, but like I said, she was a casserole mom. And I would go over to my ex-wife's house when we were dating, and her mom would cook these amazing, you know, elaborate meals where everything was from scratch, homemade bread. I mean, she would even make her pasta homemade and stuff like that. And it was just like, that was my first experience. So that I'm like 17 years old. That was my first experience with like really nice home cooked foods. And it was that experience. I was with that woman for 13 years. So I had a lot of her mom's cooking, and it was my ex-mother-in-law that inspired me to cook. That's why I like making things from scratch now and sharing my food with others because of that experience that I had with my ex-mother-in-law. She was an amazing cook, and I'm sure she still is. She's still around. I haven't talked to her in years though. Okay, so I'm just continuing to put some garlic in there. I need to grab another cluster because I just ran out of cloves that I had set. Oh no, I've got another cluster right here. There we go. So I'm just going to smash the cluster. Bryce, good afternoon and welcome. Okay, so I'm just breaking apart this cluster of garlic into its individual cloves. What a mess. Working with fresh garlic is messy, but it's so worth it. Now, don't get me wrong, I do have garlic powder and granulated garlic on hand, and I certainly do use that stuff in some recipes. But there are some times when I want to make sure I'm using fresh garlic, like when I'm making my hummus or when I'm making my falafel, which we made just a little while ago. All right, I think I'm going to stop there. I've got bits of garlic, sticky garlic all over my fingers. I'm going to take a moment to rinse my fingers, pardon me. All right. Where was I? Australia. Okay, I think that's everything. Let me just double check my recipe. I don't have the chickpeas in there yet, but I'm going to talk about why in a moment. The recipes that I'm using today are both linked at the top of chat. The one takes you to, I don't know, some woman's website for the falafel. I don't know who that is. It's just a recipe that I found. Um, and then the other for the hummus takes you to my guild's website, which is just where I have my hummus recipe posted. So let me see. We got the salt, lemon juice, garlic, tahini, olive oil. Okay, good to go. The only thing that's not in it is the chickpeas. So this is another a separate step that some people will tell you that you need to do to get your hummus to be nice and creamy. I don't usually do this, but if you're struggling to get creamy hummus, then it doesn't take any really extra time to do this, and that is just blending all the other ingredients first. Okay? So I've got everything but the chickpeas in there. And I'm going to step away for a moment while that's blending. Pardon me a sec. All right. So now all we've done is just blended the tahini, the oil, the salt, the garlic, and the lemon juice together first. So some people will tell you need to do that to get creamy hummus. I don't normally do it. This food processor that I have blends it up just fine. Even my old cheapy Hamilton Beach garage sale special one, I didn't do that. So I've made it both ways. I've experimented with that. I didn't see any difference in the finished product, but that's a step that you could try if you want to. Okay, now I'm going to throw my cooked chickpeas in there. If you weren't here earlier, we cooked these right on the show. These are chickpeas, dried chickpeas that I hydrated overnight, and now they're cooked to be nice and tender. and they're not peeled or anything. You don't need to do that. I'm just going to add those to the food processor, and we're going to blend that up. You cannot over process your hummus. And before I do that, I'm going to get my frying pan out, and I'm going to start getting that warmed up because we're going to get on to making cooking our falafel here shortly. So I've got my frying pan here. It's just a 12-inch cast iron frying pan. If you've never cooked with cast iron before, I never cooked with it until I was in my mid-30s, but I had a buddy that I worked with that was talking about how he had just gotten one and loved it, and I was very intrigued, and so I bought one, and I'm never going back. I love cooking on cast iron. It is just absolutely wonderful. The no sticking of it, yeah, I really love it. They are really heavy though, so that can be a problem, for some people. It is even a problem for me sometimes if I'm trying to lift it up and scoop stuff out of it. There is even the 12 inchers is pretty heavy, and it can even torque my wrists a little bit sometimes. But oh man, do I love cooking on cast iron. I've been cooking on it for probably about a good 15, 20, maybe 20-ish years. No, you don't have to make hummus. You can just go buy it from the store if you prefer. But I'm showing you how to make the real deal. All right, so I've got that on medium low heat to just get that oil to start. I just got about, maybe a third of an inch, maybe not more than a half an inch of oil in the pan for our falafel. So we're going to start heating that up. All right, so now we got everything in there for the hummus. You cannot over process your hummus, so don't worry about that. It's not going to ruin, it's not bad if you leave it on too long. Okay? Instead of water, and this is the most subjective part of making your hummus, is the amount of water or ice that you use. They say to use ice because that's going to make it more like whipped and creamy. I'm going to be honest with you. I've made it both ways. I haven't seen much of a difference in my food processor, but you can experiment with that at home. If your food processor is not a decent one, it might not chew up the ice very well. This is actually the first time that I'm trying to use like whole cubes, so I hope this food processor is good enough. I've definitely used ice before, but not like these big hunks of it. So I'm going to start dropping ice cubes into the hummus. Like I said, the amount of water or ice that you use, and let me know. I think you can still hear me with that thing going on, but if you can't, let me know. But this is the most subjective part of making your hummus because it's going to depend on various factors like how saturated your chickpeas are when you cook them can affect the amount of water or ice that you want to use. Okay, the other thing about it is this is where you get the creaminess. This is a big part of making it creamy. Now, hummus is going to thicken up a ton. Siege, good afternoon and welcome. Hummus is going to thicken up a ton, so you do not want to make your hummus to the consistency you want unless you're serving it immediately. If you're not serving it immediately, you need to make it on the thin side because it's going to thicken up a lot when it sets. And I can hear that all those ice cubes have blended in there. I don't hear any crunching around anymore. So this food processor was good enough to crunch up all those big hunks of ice. All right, let's see what we got so far. It's looking good. Ooh, it's a good consistency too. Let's give it a taste. Oh man. Yeah, Okay, I can tell there's enough lemon juice in there. And I think what I'm gonna do, I want to put a little bit more of the tahini in there. I'm gonna get another spatula because my other one's all dirty from the falafel. So I've got just a little bit of tahini left in my measuring cup from before. You know, it's so thick that it doesn't all pour out. So I'm gonna take the rest of that and put it in there because I just feel like it needs a little bit more of it. And as you become a more experienced hummus maker, you'll be able to pick out those kinds of things, like how lemony it is, if it needs a little bit more salt, if it needs a little bit more garlic or something. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more salt to it too. Just a hint. You can always add more salt, but if you get it over salted, it's really tough to bring it down. So just adding just a little bit of extra salt. I think the lemon juice content is good, and we're going to whip that up some more. Idealistic Cynic, good afternoon and welcome. Yes, but I wouldn't use it for this. Do not use dehydrated garlic or garlic powder or jarred garlic for your hummus. I insist that you use fresh garlic if you want to get the best hummus possible. All right, so we're done, folks. We are done. Okay, look at that. Look at how light in color that is. Isn't that beautiful? That is beautiful hummus. Also, notice the consistency. Notice that, you know, this hummus is shaking what its mama gave it, okay? Look at that. It's like a thick smoothie, okay? So this is not how I want to eat my hummus, but I know that this is going to thicken up a lot, okay? So you can put, you know, sort of, if you're new to making hummus, that's something that, you know, I didn't realize at first, is that you want to make it on the thin side at first, and because it's thinner, has more water or ice in it, you know, obviously the ice is chewed down into water. Because it's thinner when it's processing, that's what's going to help you get it so smooth. Remember, I didn't peel these chickpeas, folks. And like I said, some people will swear on their mother's graves that you have to peel your chickpeas to get smooth hummus. I promise you that this hummus is so smooth, it'll make you want to slap your own mama. It can't get any smoother than that. That is silky smoothie goodness, okay? I'm going to go put the ice back in the freezer. Pardon me for a moment. So if you've been peeling your chickpeas, please stop. It's totally not necessary. It's a gargantuan waste of time. I just showed you. I didn't peel them. I didn't even skim any of the extra skins off. I promise you this hummus, I'm not going to say that this is the best hummus on the planet, but I would be proud to put my hummus on the table against anyone's, you know. But compared to the hummus that I was making years ago when I was new to making hummus, you know, I would have been embarrassed to put my hummus on the table next to like the eateries in Detroit. But you know, I would take this stuff into La Marsa and put it on the table next to theirs. You know, maybe theirs is a little bit better. You know, theirs is the A plus in my mind, but you know, I'm gonna give this stuff an A. Okay, and look at how much hummus we got. And if that's, you know, if you just don't eat that much hummus, you know, you can half this recipe, no problem. You can just use 1 cup of dry measured chickpeas. Okay, this stuff will keep for a week if refrigerated, sometimes even a little bit longer. But do not leave fresh hummus sitting out too long because it will go bad very quickly. Okay, so transporting it can be a problem sometimes, you know, especially if it's warm. Your fresh hummus can go bad really, really quickly, and then it starts getting fizzy. And trust me, you don't want your hummus to be fizzy. If your hummus is a little fizzy, that means it's starting to turn. Okay, that's when it's starting to go bad. Okay, where was I? Australia. Um, Now I'm going to turn the heat up to medium. When you're working with cast iron, you want to heat it up slowly. You don't want to put your pan over a high heat right away. You also don't want to pour like cold liquids into a hot cast iron pan. You can literally crack it due to what's that called? It's been a long time since I've taken a physics class. Thermal expansion or something like that. So like if you have to pour a cold liquid into a hot pan, you just need to do it gradually. But if you just like dump it in there, like your cast iron pan can literally crack. So anyways, the point, that's why I was heating it up on a medium low heat. I was starting to heat up the oil just a little bit, before we started blending the hummus. But now that it's been warmed up just a little bit, I'm putting it on a medium heat, and we're going to be frying our falafel patties in oil that's over a medium heat. Now, falafel, so if you weren't here earlier, here is our falafel mix, and there's going to be two things that we're going to add to it, which is baking powder and sesame seeds. The recipe calls for toasted sesame seeds, and toasted sesame seeds are definitely magical, but I don't toast them. You can if you want to. Okay, so I'm just going to be putting sesame seeds in there. And we're going to be forming it into patties. Traditionally, they're formed into balls and deep fried, but getting the deep fryer out is kind of a pain. I'm just going to shallow fry them in about, a half inch of oil or something and make patties out of them instead. It doesn't really matter if you want to make balls or patties. It's whatever. It's going to taste the same in the end. Okay, so I'm just going to double check the recipe to make sure I get the amount correct. I believe it is 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Okay. So I got my sesame seeds here, and a little tip for you on sesame seeds. If you go to your standard grocery store and you buy sesame seeds, let me see if I can find a jar. Okay, so what's going to happen is a lot of times your standard grocery stores are just going to have, like, in the spice section, they're going to have little jars of sesame seeds. Okay, that is a very expensive way to buy sesame seeds. So if you're going through, if you use a decent amount of sesame seeds, go to an ethnic food store. Like I got this from an Indian food store, and I got this huge bag of sesame seeds for $5.99. But if you go into Walmart or something, you're going to probably pay $5.99 for a little tiny jar of sesame seeds like this. So save some money, go to your local ethnic food store, and you might be able to find, or order them online, through Amazon, I'd rather pay $5.99 for a giant bag of sesame seeds, and they last a long, long time. I've had this bag for years. We're making falafel, not waffles, sorry. Okay, so 2 tablespoons of this, 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. Doesn't have to be an exact measure. I love sesame seeds. And, one of the nice things about having sesame seeds around like this is, if you like to cook like me, there's a lot of dishes like stir fries and stuff that, can be really nice to sprinkle some sesame seeds on, at the end, and that can be a really nice way to impress a date. Your food is going to look that much nicer when you got some sesame seeds sprinkled on top, if you know what I'm saying. All right. Oh man, almost broke a glass. Fell right out of the holder. Okay, where was I? All right, baking powder. 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And I'm just gonna wipe off my teaspoon here because there's a little bit of salt on it. Okay, 1 teaspoon of baking powder. This has been sitting in the fridge for an hour. We made this on the live stream earlier. It's supposed to sit in the refrigerator for an hour before you do this. I don't know why. Maybe it helps hold it together a little bit more or something. Honestly, I don't really know why. It's just what the recipe says to do, so I did it. Now I'm going to take my spatula that I got from Spatula City, and I'm going to mix in the sesame seeds and the baking powder. I've also heard that baking powder helps hold it together I know one guy at a place that I used to love to get falafel from after my divorce in 2003, I went back to school to Eastern Michigan University. That's where I'm an alum of, and I used to go to this local Middle Eastern eatery that was just it was like an old Taco Bell building, right? And man, they had the best falafel I have ever had. Uh, oh my God, it was so good. Anyways, this was a long, years ago, and that was when I had tried to make falafel myself, and I was talking to the owner or whatever, or the cook, and I was like, man, I tried to make this myself, and it fell apart. And he was like, you gotta put baking powder in it. So maybe that has something to do with holding it together. But like I said, in the recipe that I have linked, both of the recipes I'm doing today are linked at the top of chat. The lady whose website it is talks about that phenomenon of, if you use canned chickpeas, that's why it's going to fall apart. That's what happened to me the first time I tried to make falafel, 20, 25 years ago, is I put it in the oil and it just fell apart and it was useless. And that was so discouraging that I didn't try again for years. And I just happened to come across this recipe a couple years ago. And it was because I read that section where she's like, don't use canned chickpeas because then it'll fall apart on you. And I was like, that's what happened to me. And so I was encouraged to give it a try. So I've only actually been making falafel, homemade falafel, for a couple of years now. And this is one of those things that I like to grab when I'm on my breaks. The falafel patties are so tasty, and you can freeze them, and you can keep them for, weeks, weeks and weeks, if you keep them in the freezer, and you can just pull one out, pop it in the microwave, and make a yummy wrap out of that, and your homemade hummus or your tahini sauce or whatever. Okay, so now we're gonna start cooking it. So I've mixed in the baking powder and the sesame seeds, so it's nice and thoroughly mixed. And now this is the part where we're gonna get down and dirty. Bobby, good afternoon and welcome. So I'm just gonna grab a small handful, like about a golf ball sized bit, and I'm just gonna form it into a patty by hand. Okay. Don't make them too thick. And then we're going to have something that looks like that. And then I'm just going to put it down here in my oil. Now I'm just going to make as many of these as I can fit in my frying pan. And so we're getting close to the end of the show. I thought I would have this show done in 2 hours. It's already been 2 hours and 20 minutes. We're probably going to go about 15 more minutes because by then it'll be done cooking and I'll be able to make a wrap. I'm going to make a wrap and I'm going to do something I don't normally do on stream, and that's eat on stream.
Did you give me my cheese whiz, boy?
I got your cheese whiz right here, Jeff. Jeff, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for the cheer. We'll see if that one gets stuck too. The cheers have been getting in.
Cheese whiz, boy?
Yeah. All right. I need to take corrective action here. Pardon me for a sec. Okay. So now I'm just going to continue to make these patties. Thank you again for the cheer. Okay, this one's a little bit bigger. You can make them as big or as little as you want. Don't make them too big. Okay. Otherwise, they're just going to be raw in the center. But like I was saying before, this is all, there's not any meat, eggs, or dairy in here. So if they're not cooked thoroughly, they're not going to, you're not going to get salmonella or something like that. Okay. And here's the other thing about falafel. When you first make it, the center is going to be pretty soft. That will, when you let it stand and, you refrigerate it or have it in the freezer, it'll firm up. But when you eat it right away, it's going to be pretty soft in the center. But that's okay. It's not going to hurt you. This is all just, chickpeas and garlic and onions and herbs and spices. That's it. There's nothing in there that's going to hurt you, if it's not thoroughly cooked or whatever. And it doesn't taste bad raw. I mean, you can literally eat this stuff raw, and it's fine. That's got a kick to it. Because I put the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. I put 3. Since I'm not making it for my sister. The last time I made this last weekend, I gave half of it to my sister because she loves it, and so she took it home with her. But my sister doesn't like spicy foods, but I do. So when I make it for my sister, I only put 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper. Even that's already double what the recipe calls for. But when I'm making it for myself, I do 3. And then I might even put some sriracha on the wrap. So we're just going to do 1 round of falafel. I have a lot more batter here. You know, I'm going to be able to make something like about 15 patties out of this recipe, more or less, depending on how big you make them. I'm just going to set this aside and rinse off my fingers. And what's nice about this setup is the camera is actually can be completely wireless. So let me see if I can, well, I don't think I need to unplug it to show you, but I'm going to grab the camera and give you a close up. So I'm just using my phone. Oh yeah. So those are our falafel patties in about a, 1/3 of an inch or 1/2 an inch of oil. Isn't that beautiful? And so what we're going to do is we're going to brown both sides, and then we'll be done. It's going to take a good 5 minutes per side. So I'm just going to hang out with you guys while these cook. If you have any questions about any of these recipes, well, we're basically done, guys. Um, it's just, yeah, the hummus is done and the falafel's done. I guess I can start getting my ingredients ready for my wrap. That way it's all ready to assemble by the time that these falafel babies come out of the oil. Okay, so, I'm gonna make a falafel wrap with this. We're gonna go ahead and make that right on stream. And then I'm gonna wrap it up after that. Okay? And you can put whatever you want on your falafel wrap. Now, it's traditionally served on pita bread, and if you're going to do that, the way that it's traditionally served is that you would separate the 2 pita halves so that you've got 2 pieces, and you're just going to use one to make your wrap, and you put your falafel balls in there. And traditionally, the way that I've seen it served most of the time is lettuce, tomato, maybe onions, maybe cucumber, those pickled turnips that you see in the Middle Eastern eateries all the time, and then maybe like some tahini dressing, and then you roll up the pita and you wrap up one end and the other end is opened, and that's the way that you serve it. I'm just going to be using tortillas for this. You can use whatever you want. And things that I like to put in there beyond that is I'm just going to use regular pickles, like dill pickles, instead of the pickled turnips. And I'm going to put a little bit of onion in there, some cucumber, tomato, some lettuce. You can use like I like to put banana peppers in there. You can put some sriracha in there. And there's another way that falafel is commonly served as a wrap, and it's called, like, a lot of times you see it as like falafel deluxe, or something like that, falafel supreme or whatever, or super falafel. It's instead of the lettuce and tomato and stuff, what they do is they put the falafel and then hummus and then tabbouleh. And tabbouleh is like a minced parsley with bulgur, which is cracked wheat, soaked cracked wheat, and tomato, and diced tomato, which is a really, really nice. I love tabbouleh. So, I'm just mentioning some things that you could put on your falafel. We're going to be using the hummus and not a tahini dressing, but there's a recipe for tahini dressing at the woman's website that I got this recipe from, which is linked to the top of chat. So if you prefer tahini dressing, there you go. It's really easy to make in your food processor, but I love hummus on my falafel wrap, so that's the way I'm going to be making it for you today. Do the patties facilitate them not falling? Yeah, my patties are totally intact. I mean, you can see them. You can see them on the stream right now. And before I start cutting up my fillings, I'm going to just check to see how done they are. Okay, we're actually looking pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and flip these. Kind of tricky to flip them. You know, if you want, you could use like tongs if you want, you know, instead of a spatula. You could, if you're doing patties, you could use like like some tongs or something like this, and you could grab them and flip them like that. Okay, these actually, so these are were the first ones that I put in there, so these are the most done. I can tell these others I want to keep going for a little bit longer, but I'm going to turn them because the outer edges of the pan, it's not going to brown as well. So I'm going to turn these 180 degrees to get the less browned side facing the center of the pan, the source of the heat, so that they're more evenly browned. The center one is probably ready to go. Yeah, I think we can flip this. No, yeah, when I squeeze it, it's not quite as firm. So I'm going to leave that center one going a little bit more, but I'm going to give you a close up. I've got to get a new tripod because last night when I was setting all this up, my tripod broke. Part of it broke, so I got to get a new one. But you can see how brown they are. You can see the sesame seeds on the outside. You get those little white dots are sesame seeds. And things are looking absolutely beautiful. They do look perfect, don't they? I'm so proud of my babies. Yeah, I love doing. Ooh, this almost falling out. I love this setup though because this is only my second cooking show, and when I did the last one, I did like this two camera thing where it was like a side by side because I wanted to have like a close up of the food and then like a wide shot. But you know, it just didn't. I didn't like having the two different cameras, and I actually started last night setting up something like that. But this is a really nice webcam on this camera, so on this phone. So I just decided to go with a single wide shot, and then with the ability to, you know, grab the phone and show you a close up manually, you know, I think that works pretty well. Yeah, chickpeas out of a can is going to make it fall apart. So that recipe that I have linked at the top actually talks about that. You want to make sure you use dried chickpeas that you rehydrate overnight, you know, like I have in this jar. Do not use chickpeas from a can to make your falafel. Do not use chickpeas from a can to make your hummus. It's very important that you use dried chickpeas. I talked about the importance of that earlier. It's a subtle difference. You know, if you're new to making falafel and hummus, it may seem like a trivial, nonsensical difference, but trust me, it's a huge, huge, huge difference. And as I was saying, to help you understand the difference between chickpeas from a can and chickpeas that are dried, think about the difference of like canned green beans versus frozen or fresh green beans, right? Canned green beans are like mush, you know, but fresh or frozen taste so much better. Or canned corn versus frozen or fresh corn, and you know, or other things that are canned that you're more familiar with. You know, there's a big difference between canned green beans and fresh green beans or even frozen green beans. All right, let's see how our babies are doing. I can probably flip that middle one. Boom. And we can probably flip these other ones now. Cacao. Might want to give them a little push down because they get a little bit of a muffin top. Like as the bottom and the sides cook, it kind of pushes up the filling a little bit. So you might want to give them a little push down when you flip them. You don't have to push down firmly, but you know, just give them a gentle push. And it looks like these two, which were the last ones I put in there, could still go for a little bit longer, another minute or two before I flip them. No, I'm not making you, Scriptlin. If you want to make your hummus with chickpeas from a can, I'm not going to stop you. But I'm telling you, if you want to take your hummus to the next level, if you want excellent, authentic hummus, if you want the best, you've got to use the dried chickpeas. Trust me on that one. I've been making hummus for decades, and that is a very, very, very important component of making the real deal when it comes to hummus. All right, I'm going to go ahead and flip these last two. And don't worry if if they're a little if they're a little extra browned, don't even worry about it. I mean, obviously you don't want to burn them, but if they do get just a little bit burned, I actually like a little bit of that flavor coming through. But you just cook them however as much or as little as you want to. As I said, there's no danger in undercooking these because there's nothing in here that's going to hurt you. It's not like there's raw egg in here or something and you're going to get salmonella or, and there's nothing that needs to cook thoroughly for safety reasons here. Okay, so don't worry if it's a little undercooked. It's not going to hurt anything. Yeah, they're looking really good. Let me just check the underside of these first ones that we flipped, and these are about good to go. I might leave them on for another moment. What I'm going to do now, I meant to do this before I started the stream, but I forgot. I'm going to prepare a plate and put some paper towels on it to soak up the oil. So I'm just going to get some paper towels here. Lay them down on the plate, and when we pull the patties out, this is what we're going to put the patties on. So it'll just soak up the extra oil, but I'm going to be honest with you, okay? Remember that place I told you about by my school that had like the best falafel ever? Well, they would every time you ordered falafel, they would just get their little scoop out, stick it in the deep fryer, so it was coming right out of the deep fryer. And they would take that dripping oily ball of falafel and put it right in the pita. And that little bit of extra oil, man, I know it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but man, was it freaking good. In any event, when you're frying stuff like this, you can just put some paper towel on a plate and let the stuff sit there, and that'll soak up some of the extra oil. Idealistic Cynic, thank you for saying. I had so much fun doing this with you guys. We're almost done. We're just waiting for the falafels to come off, and then we're gonna make a wrap together, and I'm just gonna show you that. As I was saying earlier, I'm the kind of guy who, I really learn from seeing other people's do stuff. We all have different learning modes. Some people can learn very effectively by reading something, and it all makes sense to them. And I'm not one of those people. Like I can read stuff and figure it out, but I learn even better when somebody shows me how to do something, and so that's kind of what this is all about. And also, like I said, I love to cook and I love sharing my food with others, and I'm sharing something that I'm most passionate about, and that is my hummus with you guys, because if you like hummus like I do, I want you to be able to make good, authentic, excellent level hummus right at home. And once you learn how to make good hummus like this, you're never going to want that store-bought hummus again. You're going to want to throw that stuff in the trash, because when you make it from scratch and you make it right, oh man, it is next level. So our hummus has already thickened up quite a bit. It's just been sitting there for about, 20 minutes or so? It's already thickened up quite a bit. In fact, one of the things I say in my recipe is that if you don't need to use your food processor right away, then leave it in there. Take the whole thing and put it in the fridge just like that. And that way, a few hours later, when you're going to serve it, you can zip it up. And if it needs a little bit more water at that point, you can. But, I've been making hummus for a long time, so I'm pretty confident about the consistency of it. I know that when it sits for an hour or two, it's going to be just the right consistency. And even if it's not the perfect consistency, it doesn't need to be perfect, It's going to come out a little bit different every time. All right, time to take our babies out of bed. Look at that. Oh, yeah. Okay. That center one, I'm sure the center one's done. I'm going to space these around when you're cooking like this. You don't want to have stuff bunched up on one side. You want that, otherwise the heat is not evenly distributed. Your oil might start smoking, and you don't really want that. All right, that baby looks done to me. Space these out a little bit, make a little bit more room. I cooked for Nimvin when he was here. He even has a picture of it that he showed on his stream. I made him my biscuits and gravy when I was here. He was here back in May because he, hey, what was that? Ah, that's Comfy's monthly Patreon pledge. Thank you so much, Comfy, for being a channel Patreon patron. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I still got more falafel to make, but I'm going to do that later. I'm going to go ahead and take my pan filled with oil and stick it in my oven. And I'll cook the rest of that stuff later. All right, so we've got ourselves seven beautiful falafel patties. Check that out. I'm going to be able to make at least 7 more out of that batch. As I said before, you can refrigerate these. I would say, you know, for up to a week or so. If you're planning on, you know, if you don't get through them in a week, put them in the freezer. You can freeze them for many weeks, okay?
Kobold happy! Yeah!
Oh, I'm glad Kobold's happy. So that's one of the nice things about making a bunch of falafel patties is you can freeze them and just whenever you want them, you can pull one out of the freezer, you know, nuke it for 45 seconds, you're good to go. And they taste great even when they're frozen. That's what I do. You know, I'll take mine when I make these, you know, I'll put them in a Pyrex container and put them in the fridge. And then, you know, whatever I don't get through in that first week, I'll just stick the rest of it in the freezer and they'll be absolutely fine. Okay, we're going to make a wrap, and then that's going to be a wrap. So we got about 5 minutes of show left for you, folks. If there's any final questions or that you have, let me know. Let me get some of this stuff out of here. So here's what I was talking about earlier how, you know, as a streamer, you know, and I know some of you are streamers too, it's very easy to fall into a rut of, you know, when we get up for our breaks, to just grab some cookies or chips or something like that. But that's a bad habit to get into because otherwise you might look like this. Okay? So when you're a streamer, it's really good, you know, or maybe you're working from home, you know, and you step away for breaks. It's really good to have good food available that you can get quickly, right? Because, you know, I don't have 20 minutes on my break. You know, I want my breaks hopefully to be about 10 minutes or so, you know, but the faster the better. So I like to keep a little Pyrex of my toppings. You know, I've got my lettuce, tomato, onion, avocado, cucumber, pickle. So I just, you know, this is what I'm grabbing during my breaks. I'm grabbing this, I'm grabbing another Pyrex with my falafel, and I'm just really quickly slapping it together. Okay, so this is just a you know, what, 10-inch tortilla. This I got from the store. And let's see. Let's put it there now. If I pull it out of the refrigerator, I like to put it in the microwave for about 10 seconds to just, you know, make it a little soft. But these have been on the counter since I started the stream, so they're nice and soft. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my falafel patties and I'm going to break it open for you so you can see what the inside looks like. It's still very warm. You can see the inside is very green. And when you first cook them, it's going to be very soft too. These will firm up a lot after they sit, but it's okay to eat it right away. Don't worry that it's, you know, soft and green on the inside. That's the way it's supposed to be. Okay, but it will firm up when it sits. So it would take about a half a patty or so. Yeah, it's super soft right now. Actually, I normally use smaller tortillas, so we're going to use about 3/4 of one of those patties. And you can just break it up into bits, like so. And then I'll just use this spatula. I'm just going to grab some of this hummus out and put some of our hummus that we just made on here. This is how I eat during the breaks, guys. Now I'm just gonna cut up a little bit. This is just a romaine heart. Okay. I'm just gonna take a little bit of lettuce and toss it on there. A little bit of tomato. Cut that up into strips. A little bit of tomato that I'm throwing on there. You can use as much or as little as you want. I got a pickle. It's very traditional for falafel to be served with pickled turnips. I don't have those. I'm just using dill pickles. Cut them up into little strips, basically. Throw them on our wrap. I like to put a little bit of raw onion on there too. If you don't like raw onion, I didn't for years, but I do like raw onion now, especially on something like this. So I'm just going to take my raw onion, toss it on there. Okay, you can put some avocado on there if you want to. I like to do the banana peppers or the the pepperoncinis or the whatever you call them, mild peppers, whatever you call them. I like to throw a few of those on there too. I love these things on a sandwich. So then you're going to have something that looks like this. Isn't that gorgeous? And then we're just going to wrap it up like a burrito. And enjoy. Oh man, it doesn't get any better than that to me, guys. It's so good. Just bring tears to my eyes. But yeah, this is often how I eat when I'm going on, I'm not eating this every day, but I go through kicks where I'm, making falafel and hummus a lot, or sometimes I'm doing other burrito stuff, like just having like black beans and stuff. But yeah, when I'm streaming, I'm going on my breaks. That's the kind of stuff that I'm slapping together real quick. I just make it ahead of time, make a batch of hummus and make a batch of falafel over the weekend and eat it throughout the week. Okay, guys, I hope that some of you will be inspired to try making your own hummus and falafel at home. As always, if you have any questions, I'm always happy to talk about, all things DDO, but I'm also happy to talk about hummus. I love talking about hummus. If you have questions about the falafel recipe, I'm happy to talk about that during my regular DDO streams as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and being part of the show. Thank you for all the support, all the cheers, the subs, the gifted subs, the donations through Streamlabs, the Patreon patrons, the Mug Club members, and everybody using bits on Viewer Attack and Lovella. I appreciate it so very much. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful rest of your weekend.